Every Sunday I scrubbed their floors and washed their dishes. But it wasn't the soap that made my hands tremble. It was the realization that I was invisible to the very people I had sacrificed everything for. For decades, I watched my own family treat me like hired help while I poured my heart into keeping their lives together. The silence of betrayal cuts deeper than any harsh word ever could, and I learned that the hardest lesson in life is discovering your worth through other people's blindness. What started as family devotion became my prison, but sometimes the very chains that bind us can become the tools of our liberation. I am Margaret, a 61-year-old woman who spent most of her life believing that love meant making myself smaller so others could shine brighter. Where are you watching this story unfold from? And have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into the chapters of my life together. I woke up at 5:30 this morning, just like I have every morning for the past 35 years. The house was still quiet, and I moved through the darkness with practiced efficiency, starting the coffee and laying out Tom's work clothes before anyone else stirred. "Mom, where's my blue tie?" Tom called from upstairs, his voice carrying that familiar edge of impatience. "In your closet, second drawer on the right," I called back, already knowing that he hadn't looked properly. "I can't find it." I climbed the stairs, my knees protesting slightly. At 61, my body carried the weight of decades spent caring for everyone else. I found the tie exactly where I'd told him it would be, hanging right in front of his face. "Here it is," I said, handing it to him. "Thanks, Maggie." He barely looked at me as he knotted the tie. "Did you remember to pick up my dry cleaning?" "Of course I did." I watched him in the mirror, this man I'd loved for 38 years, and wondered when I'd become just another item on his to-do list. Sarah rushed into the kitchen as I was packing lunches, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor I'd polished just yesterday. "Mom, I need you to take my car to the shop today. The appointment's at 2. "I have my book club at 2, I said quietly. "Can't you reschedule? This is important. I have 3 client meetings today." I looked at my daughter, so confident and beautiful in her tailored suit. When had she stopped asking and started demanding? "Of course, sweetheart. I'll call Linda and reschedule." "You're the best." She grabbed her coffee and the lunch I'd made, kissing my cheek quickly. "Oh, and can you pick up my prescription? I'm swamped this week." "Already done. It's on your dresser." She paused at the door, finally looking at me properly. "What would I do without you?" The question hung in the air after she left. I wondered if she'd ever actually tried to find out. Mike wandered down, 20 minutes later, still in his pajamas despite having a job interview at 10. "Morning, Mom. Any chance you could iron my interview shirt?" "Which one?" "The white one. The good one." I'd ironed it 3 days ago when he first mentioned the interview, but it had been sitting crumpled in his room since then. I didn't say anything. I just went upstairs and ironed it again. "You're amazing, Mom," he said when I handed it to him. "I don't know what I'd do without you." There it was again. That question that none of them ever seemed to want answered. "Mike, you're 28 years old. Maybe it's time you learned to iron your own shirts." He laughed. "Why would I need to when you do it so much better?" I watched him disappear back upstairs and felt something crack inside my chest. When had my love become their crutch? The morning routine continued, packing Tom's gym bag, finding Sarah's important documents that she'd left on the kitchen counter, making Mike's favorite breakfast even though he was too nervous to eat it. "Maggie, where are my reading glasses?" Tom called from his office. "On your head," I replied automatically. I heard him chuckle. What would I do without you? By 9 o'clock, they were all gone, and the house fell into its familiar quiet. I looked around at the pristine kitchen, the organized living room, the carefully maintained home that showcased their successes. Photos of Sarah's promotions lined the mantel. Mike's college graduation took center stage, and Tom's golf trophies gleamed from their shelf. I searched for any evidence of myself in this space I'd created and maintained. There, tucked in the corner, was a small photo from my college graduation, the degree I'd never used because I'd gotten married and pregnant instead. My dreams had become the foundation for theirs, and somewhere along the way, I disappeared entirely. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Margaret, it's Linda. I got your message about book club. Is everything okay? Just family stuff. You know how it is. Actually, I don't. When was the last time you did something just for you? I couldn't remember. I'll see you next week, Linda. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with my cold coffee and realized I couldn't recall the last time anyone in this house had asked what I wanted, what I needed, or how I felt. I was the oil that kept their machine running smoothly, invisible, until something broke down. I thought about the young woman I'd been, full of dreams and ambition. I'd wanted to start my own business, maybe something in hospitality or event planning. I'd been good with people, organized, creative, but then life happened. Marriage, babies, mortgages. And those dreams got packed away like seasonal decorations, brought out occasionally to dust off before being stored away again. Now, at 61, I felt like a ghost in my own life. I fed them, cleaned up after them, solved their problems, and celebrated their victories. But when was the last time they'd celebrated mine? When was the last time I'd had a victory worth celebrating? The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent decades making sure they never had to struggle, never had to fail, never had to figure things out on their own. In protecting them from life's difficulties, I'd made myself indispensable and invisible at the same time. As I loaded the dishwasher with their breakfast dishes, I wondered what would happen if I just stopped, if I didn't do their laundry, didn't make their appointments, didn't solve their daily crises. Would they even notice? Or would they just find new ways to work around the inconvenience? I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window and barely recognized the woman staring back. Somewhere in the process of taking care of everyone else, I'd forgotten to take care of myself. But today felt different somehow. Today that crack in my chest felt less like breaking and more like breaking open. The family dinner started like all the others. Me in the kitchen, orchestrating the meal while everyone else gathered in the living room. Their laughter drifting toward me like an invitation I'd never received. Margaret, how much longer? Tom called. The game starts in 20 minutes. Almost ready, I replied, stirring the gravy and checking the roast. Everything had to be perfect for Sarah's celebration dinner. She'd gotten the promotion she'd been working toward for months. Mom, did you get the wine I asked for? Sarah appeared in the doorway, radiant in her success. The Chateau Margaux is chilling, and I picked up that bourbon Tom likes for after dinner. Perfect. You think of everything. I wanted to say that someone had to, but I smiled instead. Go sit down. I'll bring everything out. The dining room looked beautiful. I'd used the good china, lit candles, arranged fresh flowers from the garden I'd planted and maintained. As I carried in the first course, I felt a familiar flutter of pride at creating something lovely for my family. This looks incredible, Mom, Mike said, pulling out his chair. You've outdone yourself. It's nothing special. But it was special. I'd spent all day preparing Sarah's favorite meal, making sure every detail was perfect for her celebration. "Don't be modest," Tom said, carving the roast. "You're the best cook I know." We settled into easy conversation, and for a moment I felt like part of the family instead of its chief operating officer. Sarah glowed as she talked about her new position, the team she'd be managing, the projects she'd oversee. "I still can't believe they chose me," she said, raising her wine glass. "There were 6 candidates, all with more experience." "They chose you because you're brilliant," Mike said, "and because you work harder than anyone I know." Sarah beamed. "It hasn't been easy. The long hours, the networking events, the constant pressure to prove myself. But it's all been worth it." "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," Tom said. "You've worked for this." "I really have. No one handed me anything. Everything I've achieved has been through my own determination and sacrifice." The words hit me like a physical blow. I set down my fork, my appetite suddenly gone. "I remember when you were little," Tom continued. "You always said you wanted to be the boss someday. Look at you now." "The best part is knowing I did it all myself," Sarah said. "I proved that with enough hard work, you can achieve anything." I cleared my throat softly. "Sarah, what about when you needed a place to stay during your unpaid internship? Or when your car broke down and you couldn't afford repairs?" She looked at me with confusion. "What about it?" "I'm just saying you've had support along the way." "Well, sure. But that's what family does. That's not the same as earning a promotion through merit." My chest tightened. "Of course not. I mean, anyone can give money, or a place to crash," Sarah continued. "But no one could do the work for me. No one could sit through those boring client meetings or stay late finishing presentations." "You're absolutely right," I said quietly. "The sacrifice was all mine," she said, taking another sip of wine. "The sleepless nights, the stress, missing social events because I was working. That's what real sacrifice looks like." I thought about my own sleepless nights when she was sick as a child, when she was heartbroken over boyfriends, when she was stressed about exams. I thought about the social events I'd missed because I was taking care of home so she could focus on school, then work, then career advancement. "Mom made sacrifices too," Mike said gently. Sarah waved dismissively. "That's different. That's just what mothers do. I'm talking about professional sacrifice, career sacrifice, choosing success over comfort." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Just what mothers do. "You know what I mean, Mom. You chose to be a wife and mother. That was your career choice. I chose the corporate world, which meant giving up a normal personal life." "Right," I said, my voice barely audible. "Don't get me wrong," Sarah continued, warming to her topic. "I appreciate everything you do. The cooking, the cleaning, the general life management stuff. But that's not the same as career sacrifice. You chose the easier path." The easier path. I looked around the table at my family. My husband, who'd never learned to do laundry. My son, who still couldn't navigate basic adult tasks. My daughter, who'd just dismissed 35 years of my life as the easier path. "More wine, anyone?" I asked, standing on unsteady legs. "I'll get it," Tom said, but I was already moving toward the kitchen. I stood at the sink with my back to the dining room, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Through the doorway, I could hear them continuing the conversation without me, praising Sarah's determination, discussing her bright future, celebrating her independence. Her independence, built on a foundation of my dependence, my constant availability, my willingness to handle everything else so she could focus on her career, the career she'd built entirely on her own, according to her. "Mom, are you okay?" Mike appeared beside me. "Fine, sweetheart. Just getting dessert ready." Sarah didn't mean anything by what she said. You know how she gets when she's excited. I looked at my son. This sweet man, who still lived at home because I'd never taught him that love and enabling weren't the same thing. Of course she didn't. But as I lit the candles on the cake I'd made that morning, Sarah's favorite lemon, cake with cream cheese frosting, I realized that she had meant it. They all meant it. In their minds, my contributions were so natural, so expected, that they'd become invisible. I was invisible. When I returned to the dining room with the cake, Sarah was showing Tom something on her phone. "Look at this message from my new boss. She says she's never seen someone transition into leadership so seamlessly." "That's because you're a natural," Tom said proudly. I set the cake down and began cutting slices, listening to them discuss Sarah's natural talents, her instinctive leadership abilities, her impressive work ethic. "Make a wish," I said, placing the largest slice in front of Sarah. She closed her eyes, smiled, and blew out the candles. When she opened them, she was glowing with happiness and satisfaction. "What did you wish for?" Mike asked. "That I keep growing in my career, that I keep proving I can handle anything they throw at me." "You will," Tom said. "You're completely self-sufficient." Self-sufficient. I served the rest of the cake and sat down, watching my family celebrate my daughter's complete independence. The independence I'd made possible by sacrificing my own. Later, as I cleared the dishes and loaded the dishwasher, I listened to them in the living room, their voices bright with wine and satisfaction. They'd moved on from Sarah's promotion to discussing weekend plans, vacation ideas, general family logistics, none of which included asking what I wanted to do. I finished cleaning the kitchen, wiped down the counters, and hung up the dish towel. The house was perfect again, ready for tomorrow's routine of unacknowledged service. As I turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the dark window again. But this time, instead of seeing a ghost, I saw something else entirely. I saw a woman who'd been systematically erased by the very people she'd spent her life elevating. And for the first time in decades, I felt something besides resignation. I felt angry. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to Tom's steady breathing, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word from dinner. The phrase kept echoing in my mind. The easier path. At 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs. The kitchen still smelled faintly of lemon cake, and the candles I'd blown out hours earlier. I made myself tea and sat at the table where I'd eaten countless meals, planned countless events, solved countless family crises. The easier path, I whispered to the empty room. I thought about the dreams I'd abandoned when I'd chosen marriage, and motherhood, the business degree I'd earned but never used, the small event planning company I'd wanted to start but had shelved when Sarah was born, then again when Mike came along, then again when Tom's career demanded more support. Easier. As if getting up at dawn every day for 35 years was so easy. As if managing everyone else's emotional needs while neglecting my own was easy. As if making myself smaller so they could grow larger was some kind of gift I had given myself. I pulled out my old photo albums, something I hadn't done in years. There I was at 23, graduating summa cum laude with my business degree. The young woman in the photo looked so confident, so full of possibility. She had plans. She had dreams. "What happened to you?" I asked her. But I knew what had happened. Love had happened. Marriage, pregnancy, the beautiful trap of being needed. Each sacrifice had seemed small at the time. Just postponing my dreams, not abandoning them. Just supporting Tom's career until he got established. Just focusing on the kids until they were older. Just. A lifetime of justs that had added up to nothing. I turned the pages, watching myself disappear incrementally. There I was at Sarah's first birthday party, glowing with new motherhood. At Mike's kindergarten graduation, tired, but proud. At family vacations where I was always behind the camera, never in the photos. By the time I reached the recent pictures, I was barely visible. A shadow in the background of their achievements, a blur of motion as I served and cleaned, and organized their lives. When had I become the help instead of the family? The answer came to me slowly, painfully. It had happened gradually, one small accommodation at a time, one small sacrifice that became a pattern, then an expectation, then an identity. I closed the album and walked to the mirror in the hallway. My reflection looked back at me. 61 years old, gray threading through my brown hair, lines around eyes that had seen too much and said too little. "Who are you?" I asked the woman in the glass. For the first time in decades, I couldn't answer. I'd defined myself entirely through other people for so long that I'd forgotten there was anything else to define. I was Tom's wife, Sarah's mother, Mike's mother. I was the woman who kept everyone else's life running smoothly. But what was I when they didn't need me? The thought terrified me and thrilled me in equal measure. I made another cup of tea and sat back down at the kitchen table. This time, instead of thinking about what everyone else needed, I tried to remember what I wanted. The memories came slowly, like rusty gears turning after years of disuse. I'd wanted to start my own business. I'd been good with people, organized, creative. I'd loved the challenge of solving problems, managing logistics, making events special. I'd actually started a small cleaning service when the kids were young, just to bring in extra money. I'd been good at it. Really good. My clients had loved me, referred their friends, begged me not to stop when I decided to focus on Tom's career instead. "Mrs. Chen, you're amazing," Mrs. Patterson had said when I told her I was quitting. "You don't just clean houses, you make them homes. You see what people need before they know they need it." I'd felt proud of that work, accomplished in a way that the daily grind of housework never made me feel. When I cleaned someone else's house, it was a service they valued and paid for. When I cleaned my own house, it was just expected. What if I went back to that? What if I started again? The idea felt dangerous and exciting. At 61, was I too old to build something of my own? Too set in my ways to change? Or was I exactly the right age? Old enough to know what I was. Worth, experienced enough to do it better than I could at 25? I thought about Lisa, my old friend who'd built her cleaning service into a successful business. We'd lost touch over the years, but I'd heard through mutual friends that she now employed dozens of people and specialized in high-end residential and commercial cleaning. She'd started with nothing but determination and a vision. So had I, once upon a time. I pulled out my phone and opened a notes app. For the first time in years, I started making plans that had nothing to do with anyone else's needs. "Margaret's cleaning service," I typed, then deleted it. Too basic. "Invisible no more cleaning." I tried. Too obvious. Seen and appreciated. Cleaning services. Better. I worked until dawn, researching business licenses, insurance, requirements, marketing strategies. My mind felt sharp in a way it hadn't in years, energized by the possibility of creating something that was entirely mine. When Tom came downstairs at 6:30, I was still at the table with my laptop open and notebooks spread around me. "You're up early," he said, heading straight for the coffee I'd forgotten to start. Couldn't sleep. He looked over my shoulder at the screen. "What's all this?" "Just some research." "Research for what?" I closed the laptop. "Nothing important. I'll get your coffee started." But as I moved around the kitchen, preparing his breakfast and packing his lunch, I felt different. Lighter. Like I'd been holding my breath for 30 years and had finally remembered how to exhale. I had a secret now, a plan that belonged only to me. For the first time in decades, I had something they couldn't take away, couldn't dismiss, couldn't minimize. I had a future that wasn't dependent on their needs. And that felt like the most dangerous, wonderful thing in the world. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Lisa at a coffee shop downtown, feeling nervous in a way I hadn't experienced since my first job interview 40 years ago. "Margaret Chen," Lisa said, grinning as she stood to hug me. "I can't believe it's been 5 years since we've seen each other." "I know. I'm terrible at keeping in touch." "Nonsense. We're both busy women. Sit. Tell me everything." Lisa looked amazing, confident, successful, radiating the kind of energy that came from building something meaningful. Her cleaning service had grown into an empire, and it showed in everything from her designer handbag to the way she commanded the space around her. "I have a proposition for you," I said, deciding to dive right in. "Oh, this sounds intriguing." "I want to get back into the cleaning business." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "After all these years? What changed?" I thought about how to explain it without sounding pathetic. "Let's just say I've rediscovered my professional ambitions." "And Tom, the kids, they're supportive?" "They don't know yet." Lisa leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Margaret, are you going through something?" "I'm going through an awakening," she laughed. "Those can be dangerous. I should know. I've had a few myself. So what exactly are you thinking?" "I want to start small, build a client base. Eventually, I'd like to specialize in high-end residential and maybe some commercial accounts. The market's competitive now, much more than when we were starting out 20 years ago." "I know. That's why I need your help." Lisa sipped her latte, considering. "What kind of help?" "Mentoring, advice, maybe some referrals once I'm established." "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious. What's your timeline?" "I want to be operational within 2 months." "That's ambitious. Have you thought about licensing, insurance, bonding?" "I've done my research." I pulled out a folder with all my notes. "I know what I need to do. I just need someone who's been there to help me avoid the obvious mistakes." Lisa flipped through my materials, nodding approvingly. "This is thorough. You've really thought this through." "I've had a lot of time to think lately." "And your family still doesn't know?" "Not yet. I want to have everything in place first. Smart, family can be. Complicated when it comes to major life changes." I laughed bitterly. "You have no idea." "Actually, I might. My ex-husband wasn't thrilled when I started my business. He preferred me dependent and available." "What happened?" "I became independent and unavailable. The marriage didn't survive, but the business did." I felt a chill. "I'm not looking to destroy my marriage. Of course not. But you need to be prepared for the possibility that the people in your life might not be as supportive as you hope. They'll adjust. Maybe. Or maybe they'll try to sabotage you, consciously or unconsciously. Tom wouldn't do that. Tom might not have a choice. If your independence threatens his comfort zone, he'll react accordingly. It's human nature. I hadn't considered that possibility. In my planning, I'd focused on logistics and market research, not on the psychological dynamics of changing my role in the family. "Tell me about your target market," Lisa said, moving us back to safer ground. "High-end residential to start. People who value quality over cheapest price. Eventually, I'd like to get into commercial accounts, small offices, maybe some retail, spaces. Why high-end? Because I understand that market. I know what wealthy families expect, what they value, how they live." Lisa nodded. "That's smart. Too many people try to compete on price. But the high-end market competes on quality and reliability." "Exactly. I'm not trying to be the cheapest. I want to be the best." "What's your competitive advantage?" I'd thought about this extensively. Experience, attention to detail, understanding of how successful people live and what they need. And I'm not 22 years old trying to figure out professionalism while I work. Those are all valid. What about operations? I'll start as a sole proprietor. Just me. Once I build a client base, I'll hire employees and expand. Equipment? I've priced everything out. Initial investment of about $8,000 for professional-grade equipment and supplies. Where's the money coming from? I hesitated. This was the part I was least comfortable discussing. I have some savings. Your own savings or family savings? Mine. I've been putting aside money for years. It was true, though I hadn't told Tom about the account. I'd been secretly saving small amounts from the household budget for over a decade, originally thinking it might be for a family vacation or home renovation. Now it would become my independence fund. Good for you. Financial independence is crucial. We spent the next hour going over practical details, licensing requirements, insurance options, marketing strategies, pricing structures. Lisa was generous with her knowledge and enthusiastic about my plans. "I think you could really succeed at this," she said as we prepared to leave. "You have the experience, the maturity, and from what I can see, the determination. Will you help me?" "Absolutely. In fact, I have a proposition for you." "Oh?" "I have a client who's been asking for a more personalized service than we can provide. She's high maintenance but pays well. Would you be interested in starting?" "With her?" My heart raced. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Her name is Mrs. Harrison. Big house in Westfield. Very particular about how things are done. She went through 3 cleaning services last year." "What makes you think I'd be different?" "Because you understand her world. You know how to manage a household, not just clean it." I felt a surge of excitement and terror. When would she want to start? "I could set up a meeting for next week." "Next week?" My voice came out higher than intended. "Margaret, are you ready for this or not?" I thought about the dinner table conversation 3 weeks earlier. About being invisible, dismissed, taken for granted. About Sarah's easier path comment and the years of unacknowledged sacrifice. "I'm ready." "Good. I'll call Mrs. Harrison this afternoon." As I drove home, I felt like I was living in someone else's life. The woman who'd had coffee with Lisa, who'd discussed business plans and client referrals, who'd committed to starting her own company. That couldn't be the same woman who'd been making beds and packing lunches for 35 years. But it was. It was me. and I was finally ready to let her out. When I got home, the house was empty. Tom was at work. The kids were living their independent lives. I walked through the rooms I'd maintained so carefully for so many years, seeing them with new eyes. This was my laboratory. This was where I'd learned to anticipate needs, solve problems, manage complex logistics. I'd been running a household like a CEO runs a company. I just hadn't been getting paid for it. That was about to change. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I had a business to build, and for the first time in decades, I was building something that was entirely mine. The secret felt powerful and dangerous, like carrying a lit match in my pocket. Soon I'd have to let it out. Mrs. Harrison's house was exactly what I'd expected. A sprawling colonial in the most expensive part of Westfield, with manicured gardens and a circular driveway that could accommodate 6 cars comfortably. "You must be Margaret," she said, opening the door before I could ring the bell. "Lisa spoke very highly of you." Eleanor Harrison was 70-something, impeccably dressed even at 10 in the morning, with the kind of bearing that came from a lifetime of having things done her way. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mrs. Harrison." "Please call me Eleanor. Come in, let me show you round." The house was stunning. High ceilings, marble floors, antique furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. But as we walked through the rooms, I could see the issues that had probably frustrated the previous cleaning services. "This is my husband's study," Eleanor said, opening the door to a room that looked like a paper bomb had exploded. "He's particular about not moving anything, but he also expects it to be spotless." I nodded, already formulating a system. "Does he have a filing method he prefers?" "You're the first person to ask that question." "Organization and cleaning go hand in hand. There's no point in making something spotless if it's still chaotic." Eleanor smiled. "Exactly." We continued the tour, and I found myself falling into a familiar rhythm. Not just seeing what needed to be cleaned, but understanding how the family lived, what their priorities were, where the stress points might be. "The kitchen is my biggest challenge," Eleanor said, leading me into a gourmet space that was beautiful but clearly underutilized. "I used to love cooking, but arthritis makes it difficult now. I end up ordering takeout and feeling guilty about the mess. What if we set up a system where I prep some basic meals when I'm here? Nothing complicated, just things you can heat up easily during the week." Eleanor stopped walking. "You would do that?" "It's all part of household management. Cleaning is just one component. The other services just wanted to dust and vacuum. I'm not the other services." By the end of the tour, I could see that Eleanor wasn't just looking for a cleaning lady. She was looking for someone who understood that maintaining a home was about creating an environment where people could live their best lives. "When could you start?" she asked as we sat in her living room. "Next week, if that works for you." "What are your rates?" I quoted the price Lisa and I had agreed on. Substantially higher than standard cleaning services, but justified by the level of service I'd provide. Eleanor didn't flinch. "That seems reasonable for what you're offering." "I'll need a key and the security code. I can work around your schedule, but I find it's usually easier if you're not home while I'm working." "Agreed. Tuesdays and Fridays work best for me." We shook hands, and I felt a thrill I hadn't experienced in years. I had a client. I had a business. "One more thing," Eleanor said as I prepared to leave. "Lisa mentioned you're just starting out. May I ask what you did before this?" "I managed a household, a very demanding one." She laughed. "Then you're perfectly qualified. Driving home, I felt giddy with excitement and terror. I'd done it. I'd taken the first real step toward independence. But I still had to tell my family. I decided to start small. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, I made my announcement. "I've started a small business," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Tom looked up from his phone. "What kind of business?" "Cleaning services." Mike laughed. "Mom, you already clean our house for free. Why would you clean other people's houses?" "Because other people will pay me for it." Sarah frowned. "You want to be a maid?" The word hit like a slap. "I want to be a business owner." "It's the same thing," Sarah said. "You're talking about manual labor. There's nothing wrong with manual labor." "Of course not, but, Mom, you have a college degree. You could do something more." "Professional." "This is professional." Tom put down his phone. "Maggie, where is this coming from? We don't need the money." "Maybe I need the purpose." "You have purpose. You have us." The familiar weight settled on my chest. "I want to try something new." "But cleaning." Sarah shook her head. "What will people think?" "Which people?" "I don't know. Our friends, neighbors, my colleagues. It's embarrassing." I felt my new confidence wavering. "Embarrassing?" "You know what I mean. It reflects on all of us." "How?" Sarah sighed like she was explaining something obvious to a child. "If my mother is working as a maid, what does that say about how well I'm doing? About how well Dad's doing? It makes it look like we can't take care of you." "Maybe I don't want to be taken care of." "Don't be ridiculous. Everyone wants to be taken care of." I looked around the table at my family. My husband, who couldn't find his glasses when they were on his head. My son, who couldn't iron a shirt. My daughter, who thought financial independence was embarrassing if it came from the wrong kind of work. "I've already booked my first client." "Cancel it," Tom said. "No." "Margaret, this is silly. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." Mike reached across the table and patted my hand. "Mom, if you're bored, why don't you join a club or take a class? You don't need to work." "I want to work." "But why cleaning?" Sarah asked. "It's so beneath you." "Nothing honest is beneath me." "You know what I mean." "Actually, I don't. Please explain how earning money through skilled work is beneath me." Sarah looked uncomfortable. "It's just, you could do better." "Better than what? Better than being financially independent? Better than building something of my own?" "Better than scrubbing toilets for strangers," Tom said bluntly. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with them alternating between dismissing my plans and trying to talk me out of them. Not once did anyone ask if this was something I wanted to do. Not once did anyone express interest in my happiness or fulfillment. They were worried about their image, their convenience, their comfort, just like always. "I'm doing this," I said finally, "with or without your support." "Fine," Sarah said, standing abruptly. "But don't expect me to advertise it to my friends." After dinner, as I cleaned up the dishes, ironically, I felt both deflated and determined. Their reaction had hurt, but it hadn't surprised me. They'd spent 35 years seeing me as an extension of themselves, rather than as an individual with my own dreams and ambitions. That was about to change, whether they liked it or not. The next Tuesday, I arrived at Eleanor's house at 9 in the morning, my car loaded with professional equipment I'd bought with my secret savings. I was nervous but excited, like the first day of school. "Good morning, Margaret," Eleanor called from her breakfast nook. I'll be out of your hair in just a few minutes. Take your time." I started in the kitchen, not just cleaning but organizing, creating systems that would make Eleanor's daily life easier. I labeled containers, arranged cabinets by frequency of use, and prepared 3 simple meals she could reheat throughout the week. The work felt different than cleaning my own house. Here my efforts were valued, noticed, appreciated. When Eleanor returned that afternoon, she walked through the house with obvious delight. "Margaret, this is incredible. You didn't just clean, you transformed everything. I want you to be comfortable in your own home. You've made it, better than it's been in years." I felt a pride I hadn't experienced in decades. This was what recognition felt like. This was what it felt like to have your work acknowledged and valued. "Same time Thursday?" I asked. "Absolutely. And Margaret, I have some friends who might be interested in your services." By the end of the month, I had 3 regular clients and a waiting list. Word spread quickly through Eleanor's social circle. Wealthy women who valued quality and were willing to pay for it. At home, my family barely noticed my new schedule. They were so accustomed to my availability that they didn't register my Tuesday and Friday absences. When they needed something during those times, they just waited until I got home to ask for it. "Where were you today?" Tom asked one Tuesday evening. "Working." "Oh, right, your cleaning thing. How's that going?" "Very well, actually." "Good for you," he said, already turning back to his phone. The dismissal stung, but it also fueled my determination. Each client I gained, each check I deposited, each moment of professional satisfaction was a step away from invisibility. I was building something they couldn't ignore, couldn't minimize, couldn't take away. And I was just getting started. 2 months into my business, I was cleaning Mrs. Patterson's home office when I overheard a phone conversation that changed everything. "Tom, I'm telling you as a friend," Mrs. Patterson was saying into her phone, her voice carrying from the kitchen where she thought I couldn't hear. "Margaret's been asking around about business loans. Significant amounts." My hands stilled on the bookshelf I was dusting. Tom was friends with Mrs. Patterson's husband from the golf club, but I hadn't realized they were close enough for her to be reporting on my activities. "I thought you should know since she hasn't mentioned it to you. Bob says she's been to 3 different banks in the past month." He had been to banks, but not for loans. I'd been setting up business accounts, exploring credit lines for equipment purchases, researching small business resources, all standard steps for a growing business. But apparently, my financial independence was being monitored and reported back to my husband. No, she seems to be handling it herself. That's what's concerning Bob. Usually, wives discuss major financial decisions with their husbands. I finished the bookshelf and moved closer to the kitchen, my anger building with each word. "Well, you know how these midlife crisis things go. She'll probably get tired of it soon and come to her senses. Midlife crisis." I closed my eyes and counted to 10. Of course. We're all rooting for her to succeed. It's just, well, you know Margaret. She's always been so focused on family. This independent streak is a little out of character. I'd heard enough. I finished my work in record time and left without my usual chat with Mrs. Patterson. In my car, I called Tom. "Hey, Maggie, what's up? We need to talk when you get home tonight." "About what?" "About your friends monitoring my business activities and reporting back to you." Silence. Then, "I don't know what you mean. 7 o'clock. Kitchen table, don't be late." I spent the rest of the day thinking about what Mrs. Patterson had revealed. My family wasn't just unsupportive of my business. They were actively keeping tabs on it, discussing it behind my back, waiting for me to fail. At 7 sharp, Tom walked into the kitchen, looking like a man preparing for an unpleasant conversation. "Sit down," I said. "Maggie, if this is about Betty Patterson, it's about much more than Betty Patterson." He sat reluctantly. "Look, she mentioned that you'd been to some banks. I was curious, okay? You've been secretive about this whole business thing. Secretive or independent? Is there a difference? There's a huge difference. Secretive implies I'm hiding something wrong. Independent means I'm handling my own affairs. We're married, Margaret. We're supposed to handle things together. Like how we handled your golf club membership, or your new car, or your decisions to refinance the mortgage without telling me. Hepukt uncomfortable. That's different. How? Those were household decisions made by you for the household without consulting me. I consult you. You inform me. There's a difference." Tom ran his hands through his hair. "What do you want from me, Margaret?" "I want you to stop having your friends spy on me." "Nobody's spying. Betty was just making conversation about my private business dealings. She was concerned. About what? About you making financial commitments without discussing them with your family." I leaned back in my chair. "What financial commitments?" "The loans you've been applying for." "I haven't applied for any loans." Tom looked confused. "But Betty said I'd been to banks." "I have. To set up business accounts, establish credit, research options, standard business practices." "Oh. But the fact that you immediately assumed I was doing something behind your back, something that required intervention from your golf buddies, tells me everything I need to know about how you see me." "That's not fair, isn't it?" "Tom, when was the last time you asked me how my business was going? Not whether it was interfering with dinner plans or household management, but how it was actually going?" He was quiet for a long moment. "How is it going?" "Too late. The question doesn't count when I have to demand it." "Margaret, you're being unreasonable." "Am I? Let me ask you something else. Do you know how much money I made last month?" "No." "Do you know how many clients I have?" "No." "Do you know what my business goals are?" "No, but you know that Betty Patterson thinks I went to 3 banks, and you know that Bob Patterson thinks wives should discuss financial decisions with their husbands." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "I was just concerned." "You were just controlling." "That's not true." "Then prove it. Tell me one thing, just one thing, that you know about my business that you learned by asking me directly, instead of hearing it secondhand from someone else." The silence stretched between us. Finally, Tom said, "I know you clean Eleanor Harrison's house twice a week. How do you know that?" "You told me?" "No, Tom, I didn't. Eleanor's husband golfs with you. You know because someone else told you, not because you took any interest in my life." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden I'd planted and maintained for 20 years. "Do you want to know how my business is going?" I asked without turning around. "Yes." "I have 6 regular clients. I'm booked solid for the next month. I made more money in April than I've ever made in my life. I'm researching expansion options. I'm happier and more fulfilled than I've been in decades." I turned around to face him. "And not once have any of you asked me about any of it. But you've all found time to discuss it behind my back, to monitor my activities, to express concern about my independence. We're worried about you." "No, you're worried about yourselves. You're worried about how my success reflects on you, how my independence affects your comfort, how my happiness changes your lives. That's not true. Isn't it? Tom, when I started this business, what was your first concern? He was quiet. It wasn't my happiness. It wasn't my fulfillment. It wasn't whether this was something I wanted to do. Your first concern was what people would think. I want you to be happy. Do you? Or do you want me to be happy in ways that don't inconvenience you? I sat back down across from him. Let me tell you what I've learned in the past 2 months. I've learned that I'm good at business. I'm good at managing people, solving problems, building relationships. I've learned that I have skills and talents that extend far beyond keeping your life organized. I never said you didn't. You never acknowledged that I did. For 35 years, you've seen me as the person who makes your life easier, not as a person with my own potential. Margaret, that's not... It is fair, and it's accurate, and it's about to change. Tom looked genuinely confused. What does that mean? It means I'm not asking for your permission anymore. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm informing you that I have a business, it's successful, and it's growing. And what about us? What about the family? What about, us? Will you still have time for us? I almost laughed. Tom, for 35 years, I've had nothing but time for you. I've scheduled my entire life around your needs, your schedules, your priorities. Now I have 6 clients who take up 12 hours of my week, and you're worried about whether I'll have time for you? It's not just the time, it's the attention, the focus. You seem different. I am different. I'm happier. But what about me? And there it was, the question that lay underneath all of their concerns, all of their resistance, all of their monitoring and reporting and worrying. What about them? You'll adapt, I said simply. What if I don't want to adapt? I looked at this man I'd loved for 38 years. This man who was more concerned about his own comfort than my happiness, and felt something shift inside me. Then that's your choice to make. The conversation ended there, but the revelation continued. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to other things I'd missed or ignored. Tom's comments about household management became more pointed. Sarah's eye rolls when I mentioned work became more frequent. Mike's requests for help became more demanding. They weren't just unsupportive. They were actively undermining my confidence and success, and I was done pretending not to notice. The moment I'd been building toward came on a Sunday afternoon in late May. I was in the kitchen preparing for a family barbecue, the first one I'd hosted since starting my business, when I overheard Sarah on the phone in the living room. I know, it's so embarrassing, she was saying. My mother, the 61-year-old cleaning lady. Yes, cleaning lady. She calls it a business. But let's be real. I set down the knife I'd been using to slice vegetables and moved closer to the doorway. The worst part is, she acts like she's some kind of entrepreneur. Like she's the next Steve Jobs or something. It's pathetic, honestly. My hands clenched into fists. I can't bring clients to family events anymore. What if they found out? Oh, by the way, my mom scrubs toilets for a living. Career suicide. No, Dad's not handling it well either. He's hoping it's just a phase, but it's been 3 months now. She's actually making money, which makes it worse, because now she thinks she's successful. I'd heard enough. I walked into the living room where Sarah was lounging on the couch, phone pressed to her ear. Hang up, I said quietly. She looked up, startled. I have to go, she said into the phone. Family stuff. She ended the call. and looked at me with the expression of someone who'd been caught but wasn't sure how much trouble she was in. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough. Call your brother and your father. We're having a family meeting." "Mom, I was just—" "Call them. Now." 20 minutes later, we were all seated around the kitchen table. The irony wasn't lost on me that this was the same table where I'd served them thousands of meals, where I'd helped with homework, where I'd listened to their problems and celebrated their successes. Now it was time for them to listen to me. "I have some things to say, and you're going to hear them," I began. "No interruptions, no explanations, no justifications. Just listen." Tom opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "For 35 years, I have organized your lives, managed your schedules, solved your problems, and celebrated your achievements. I have been your personal assistant, your cheerleader, your safety net, and your support system." I looked at each of them in turn. I have never asked for recognition, appreciation, or acknowledgement. I told myself that love was enough, that your happiness was enough, that being needed was enough. My voice grew stronger. But it wasn't enough, because while I was making myself smaller, so you could grow larger, you forgot that I was a person with my own dreams, my own potential, my own worth. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. 3 months ago, I started a business. Not because we need money, not because I'm having a midlife crisis, but because I wanted to build something that was mine. Something that would give me the same sense of purpose and accomplishment that you all take for granted in your own careers. I stood up and began pacing. "Do you know what your response has been? Tom, you've had your golf buddies monitor my banking activities. Sarah, you've told your friends that having a mother who owns a successful business is embarrassing. Mike, you've acted like my work is a cute hobby that shouldn't interfere with your needs. Mom, that's not—" Mike started. I said no interruptions. He closed his mouth. "Not one of you has asked me how the business is going. Not one of you has expressed pride in my success. Not one of you has shown any interest in my happiness or fulfillment." I stopped pacing and faced them directly. "Instead, you've worried about how my independence affects your image, your comfort, your convenience. You've dismissed my work as beneath me, pathetic, embarrassing." Sarah looked down at her hands. "Well, let me tell you about my pathetic, embarrassing little business. I have 12 regular clients now. I employ 2 part-time assistants. I'm booked solid for the next 6 weeks. I made more money last month than Tom makes in 2 months. Tom's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. "That's right. Your cleaning lady wife is out earning your impressive corporate salary. How's that for embarrassing?" The silence in the room was deafening. "But here's the real revelation," I continued. "It's not about the money. It's about respect. My clients value me. They appreciate my work. They see me as a professional who provides an essential service that improves their lives." I sat back down and looked at each of them. You see me as the help. That's not true," Tom said quietly. "Isn't it? When was the last time any of you thanked me for doing your laundry? When was the last time you acknowledged that I manage this household like a CEO manages a company? When was the last time you treated my contributions as valuable rather than expected?" They were all staring at their hands now. I have spent 35 years being invisible in my own family. I have sacrificed my dreams, my ambitions, my identity to support yours. And not once, have any of you acknowledged that sacrifice or shown gratitude for it. My voice broke slightly, but I pushed through. Sarah, you stood in this kitchen 3 months ago and told us that your promotion proved you could achieve anything through hard work and sacrifice. You said no one had handed you anything, that you'd done it all yourself. Sarah's face flushed red. But who paid for your unpaid internship? Who supported you when your car broke down? Who listened to you complain about difficult clients and boring meetings? Who celebrated every small victory and helped you through every setback? You did, she whispered. I did. But according to you, that was just what mothers do. That wasn't real sacrifice because I chose the easier path. Tears were running down Sarah's cheeks now. Mike, you're 28 years old, and you still bring me your shirts to iron. You still ask me to make your favorite meals when you're stressed. You still treat me like a service you're entitled to, rather than a person who chooses to help you. Mike looked stricken. And Tom, I turned to my husband. You have lived for 38 years with a woman who anticipated your needs, managed your social calendar, maintained your home, and supported your career. And when that woman decided to build something of her own, your first instinct was to have her monitored and controlled. Tom's face was pale. So here's what's going to change, I said, my voice steady and strong. I am no longer your personal assistant. I am no longer your safety net. I am no longer your automatic solution to every inconvenience. I stood up again. I am a business owner. I am a professional. I am a person with my own goals, my own schedule, and my own priorities. And if you want to be part of my life, you need to learn to respect that. What does that mean, exactly? Tom asked. It means you learn to do your own laundry. It means you make your own appointments. It means you figure out what you want for dinner and either cook it yourself or order it yourself. And if we don't? Sarah asked, her voice small. I looked at my daughter, this accomplished, successful woman who was crying because her mother had finally stood up for herself. Then you'll learn that the woman you've taken for granted for 35 years was a lot more essential to your lives than you realized. I walked toward the kitchen door, then turned back. I love you all. I always will. But I will not be invisible anymore. I will not be dismissed, minimized, or treated like the help. Mom, Mike said, his voice cracking. We never meant to make you feel invisible. I looked at my son, my sweet, dependent son who had never learned that love and enabling weren't the same thing. Intent doesn't matter, Mike. Impact does. And the impact of 35 years of being taken for granted is that I forgot I was worth more than that. I opened the door to leave, then turned back one final time. But I remember now. The house was different after that Sunday. The change was subtle but unmistakable, like the air pressure had shifted, leaving everyone slightly off balance. For the first few days, they all walked on eggshells around me. Tom made his own coffee in the morning and actually thanked me when I cooked dinner. Sarah called twice to ask how I was doing, her voice carefully cheerful. Mike did his own laundry, and only burned one shirt in the process. But I could see the effort it took, the conscious thought required for behaviors that had been automatic for decades. They were trying, but it felt performative, temporary. The real test came on a Thursday morning when I was getting ready to leave for Eleanor's house. "Margaret, where are my golf shoes?" Tom called from upstairs. I paused at the front door, car keys in hand. For 35 years, I would have dropped everything to help him search. Today, I called back. "I don't know. Did you check the garage?" "I can't find them." "They're your shoes, Tom. You'll figure it out." I heard his footsteps on the stairs as I backed out of the driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see him standing in the doorway, looking confused and slightly lost. It felt terrible and wonderful at the same time. At Eleanor's house, I threw myself into work with renewed energy. The physical labor felt like meditation, each task a small declaration of independence. "You seem different today," Eleanor observed when she returned from her doctor's appointment, lighter somehow. "I had an important conversation with my family." "About the business?" "About everything." Eleanor poured herself tea and sat at the kitchen island, where I was organizing her spice rack. "Want to talk about it?" I found myself telling her the whole story, the years of invisibility, the dismissive comments about my work, the confrontation at the kitchen table. Eleanor listened without judgment, occasionally nodding in understanding. "Good for you," she said, when I finished. "It's about time." Was I too harsh? Probably not harsh enough. "Margaret, I've been watching you work for months now. You're incredibly skilled, organized, and professional. The fact that your own family couldn't see that says more about them than about you. They're trying to adjust, are they? Or are they just waiting for you to go back to the way things were?" It was a question I'd been avoiding, but Eleanor was right to ask it. The eggshell treatment felt more like appeasement than genuine change. That evening, I got my answer. I arrived home at 6 to find Mike sitting at the kitchen table with a pile of wrinkled shirts. "Mom, thank God you're here. I've been waiting for hours." "Waiting for what?" "For you to iron these. I have a date tonight and nothing fits right." I stared at him. "Mike, we talked about this. You're 28 years old. I know, but I tried ironing them myself and they look terrible. Please? Just this once?" "You tried once and gave up?" "It's harder than it looks." I sat down across from him. "How many times do you think I've ironed shirts in my lifetime?" "I don't know. A lot? Thousands. Literally thousands. Do you think I was born knowing how to iron? Do you think it was easy the first time I tried?" Mike looked uncomfortable. "Probably not. I learned by doing it badly until I got good at it, just like you can. But you're so much better at it. Because I've had practice, because I've done it thousands of times while you've done it once." Mike picked up one of the shirts and examined the wrinkles. "It really does look awful. So practice. Watch YouTube videos. Ask the dry cleaner for tips. Figure it out. Or you could just do it this one time, and I promise I'll learn." I looked at my son, this grown man who was trying to negotiate his way out of basic adult responsibilities, and felt a familiar tug of sympathy. It would be easier to just iron the shirts. It would take me 15 minutes, and he'd be grateful and happy. But easier for whom? "No, Mike." "Mom, please. I'm already running late." "Then you should have started earlier." "I didn't know it would be so hard." "Now you do." Mike stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You're really not going to help me?" "I'm helping you by not helping you." That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. Every time I solve a problem for you, I rob you of the opportunity to solve it yourself. Every time I make your life easier, I make you less capable. Mike was quiet for a moment. "Is that what you think? That we're not capable?" The question caught me off guard. "I think you're all very capable. But you've never had to prove it, because I've always been there to handle the difficult parts." "So this is about us learning to be independent?" "This is about me learning to let you be independent." Mike nodded slowly. "That's actually kind of sad." "What is?" "That you've been protecting us from our own lives for so long that we forgot how to live them." I felt tears prick my eyes. It was the first sign that any of them understood what I'd been trying to say. "Yeah." I said quietly. "It is sad." Mike picked up the iron. "Will you at least stay here while I figure this out? In case I burn the house down?" I laughed despite myself. "I'll stay, but I'm not doing it for you. I know." As I watched my 28-year-old son carefully iron his first shirt, taking his time figuring out the pressure and technique, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt proud of him for struggling. An hour later, Tom came home to find Mike at the ironing board and me reading a book at the kitchen table. "What's going on here?" Tom asked. "Mike is learning to iron," I said without looking up. "Why aren't you helping him?" "Because he doesn't need help. He needs practice." Tom looked back and forth between us, clearly confused by this break in routine. "Did you find your golf shoes?" I asked. "Eventually. They were in the garage, behind the lawnmower." "I'm glad you found them. It took me 45 minutes. Now you know where to look next time." Tom sat down at the table with us. "Margaret, are you angry with us?" I looked up from my book. "No, Tom. I'm not angry." "Then why are you acting so different?" "Because I am different. But things were fine the way they were." "For whom?" Tom was quiet for a moment. "For all of us," I thought. "They were fine for you because your life was organized and effortless. They were fine for the kids because their problems were solved before they became problems. They weren't fine for me because I disappeared in the process." "You didn't disappear." "When was the last time you asked me what I wanted for dinner?" Tom looked confused. "You always know what to make." "When was the last time you asked me what I wanted to do on the weekend?" "You always seem happy." "To go along with our plans." "When was the last time you asked me what I wanted? Period." The silence stretched between us while Mike continued ironing in the background. "I don't know," Tom admitted finally. "Neither do I. And that's the problem." Tom reached across the table and took my hand. "What do you want, Margaret?" The question was so simple, so overdue, that it took my breath away. "I want to be seen," I said. "I want to be valued. I want to be treated like a person instead of a service." "And your business? This cleaning thing?" "My business is how I found out I was worth more than I believed," Tom nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to understand." "Are you? You're not just cleaning houses. You're proving something to yourself." "I'm not proving anything. I'm remembering something I forgot." "What's that?" "That I'm capable of more than I ever allowed myself to believe." From the ironing board, Mike called out, "Mom, does this look right?" I looked at the shirt he was holding up, still wrinkled in places but significantly better than when he'd started. "It looks like progress," I said. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. 3 weeks after our kitchen table confrontation, Sarah showed up at my door on a Saturday morning with coffee and something that looked suspiciously like an apology. "Can we talk?" she asked, holding up 2 cups from my favorite coffee shop. I let her in, curious about this new version of my daughter, the one who brought offerings and asked for my time instead of demanding it. We sat in the living room, and for the first few minutes we just drank our coffee in awkward silence. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the promotion, about doing it all myself." "Okay. You were right. I didn't do it all myself." I waited, not wanting to interrupt what felt like a difficult moment for her. "I was so focused on proving myself at work that I forgot about all the ways you made it possible for me to focus on work in the first place." Sarah's voice was quiet. uncertain in a way I hadn't heard since she was small. When I was doing that unpaid internship, I never worried about rent or groceries because I knew you and Dad would help if I needed it. When I was working late every night, I never worried about whether I'd have clean clothes or food in the fridge because I knew you'd handle it when I came home. She set down her coffee cup and looked directly at me. I took all of that for granted. I took you for granted. You were building your career. No, Mom. Don't make excuses for me. I was selfish. I was so busy being proud of my independence that I ignored how dependent I actually was. I felt tears welling up, but I didn't speak. And then when you started your business, instead of being proud of you, I was embarrassed. Do you know how terrible that makes me feel? Sarah, let me finish. Please. I nodded. I was embarrassed because I'd bought into this stupid idea that some work is more valuable than other work. That having a corporate title makes you more important than providing actual services that improve people's lives. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But you know what? I've been thinking about my job, and half of what I do is useless. I sit in meetings where we talk about talking about things. I write reports that no one reads. I manage people who could probably manage themselves if we got out of their way. She laughed bitterly. You clean Eleanor Harrison's house, and at the end of the day, her life is genuinely better. You solve real problems for real people. How is that less valuable than what I do? Different kinds of work have different purposes. Stop defending me, Mom. I was wrong, and I know I was wrong. We sat quietly for a moment. I want to know about your business, Sarah said finally. Really know about it. Not because I'm trying to make up for being awful, but because I genuinely want to understand what you've built. So I told her about Eleanor and Mrs. Patterson and my other clients, about the satisfaction of solving organizational problems and creating systems that made people's lives easier, about the pride I felt when clients referred their friends, when they trusted me with their homes and their personal spaces. How many employees do you have now? Sarah asked. 3 part-time assistants. We're actually looking to hire another one. What's your biggest challenge? Scaling without compromising quality. Every new client wants the same level of personal attention, but there are only so many hours in the day. Sarah leaned forward, genuinely interested. Have you thought about specializing? Maybe focusing on high-end residential and referring the smaller jobs to other services. I blinked in surprise. Actually, yes. Lisa suggested the same thing. Who's Lisa? My mentor. She owns the largest cleaning service in the county. Smart. What about commercial accounts, office buildings, retail spaces? I've considered it, but the margins are tighter and the competition is fierce. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. But commercial accounts offer more stability. Residential clients might cancel if they hit financial trouble, but businesses need to maintain their spaces, regardless. I stared at my daughter. You're thinking about this strategically. It's a business, Mom. A real business, with real challenges and opportunities. I should have been thinking about it strategically from the beginning. We talked for another hour about marketing strategies, employee management, customer service, standards. Sarah asked intelligent questions and offered thoughtful suggestions. For the first time in years, we were having a conversation as equals, not as mother and child. I have a confession, Sarah said as she prepared to leave. What's that? I told my boss about your business. My heart sank. Sarah. No, listen. I told her about it because I was proud. I said my mother started a successful business at 61 and built it into something amazing in just a few months. You did? I did. And you know what she said? I shook my head. She said she wished she had that kind of courage. She said most people talk about starting their own business, but never actually do it. Sarah hugged me at the door, something she hadn't done spontaneously in years. I'm proud of you, Mom. I should have said that months ago, but I'm saying it now. After she left, I sat in the living room feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. 2 days later, Mike called. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. I was at Eleanor's house, reorganizing her home office when my phone rang. There was something different in Mike's voice. A seriousness I wasn't used to hearing. What is it, honey? Are you disappointed in me? The question caught me off guard. I sat down in Eleanor's desk chair, giving him my full attention. Why would you ask that? Because I'm 28, and I've never lived on my own. Because I still bring my laundry home. Because I asked you to iron my shirts like I was 12 years old. I was quiet for a moment, choosing my words carefully. I'm not disappointed in you, Mike. I'm disappointed in myself for not preparing you better. What do you mean? I mean, I made it too easy for you to avoid growing up. Every time you struggled with something, I fixed it. Every time you faced a challenge, I removed it. I thought I was helping, but I was actually hurting you. So you think I'm immature? I think you're capable of much more than you've been allowed to show. There was a long pause. I've been thinking about moving out, he said finally. That's wonderful. Is it? I'm terrified. I don't know how to do anything. You know how to iron shirts now. Mike laughed. Yeah, I do. It took me 3 tries, but I figured it out. That's how you learn everything else. One skill at a time. Will you help me look for apartments? Not find them for me, but come with me? Give me advice? This time it was my turn to pause. The old Margaret would have taken over, would have searched listings and scheduled viewings and probably tried to negotiate the lease. The new Margaret understood the difference between helping and enabling. I'd love to help you look, but you have to do the searching, the calling, the decision-making. I'll be there for advice and support. Deal. After we hung up, I realized I felt proud of him again. Not for an accomplishment, but for asking the right questions. That evening at home, Tom was in the kitchen when I arrived, actually cooking dinner. He looked up when I walked in, slightly sheepish. I thought I'd try making that chicken thing you do. I looked at the scene. Chicken breasts pounded flat, herbs and spices arranged on the counter, vegetables chopped and ready. He'd clearly been working at this for a while. It smells wonderful. I found your recipe box. I hope that's okay. Of course it's okay. It's your kitchen too. Tom served dinner with the careful attention of someone who wasn't sure what he was doing, but was determined to do it well. The chicken was slightly overcooked and the seasoning was off, but it was edible and made with genuine effort. This is good, I said, and meant it. Really? Really. And it will get better with practice. Tom smiled, looking pleased with himself in a way I hadn't seen in years. Margaret, I want you to know I've been thinking about what you said. About asking what you want. Okay. So I'm asking, what do you want? The question still took my breath away, but this time I was ready for it. I want partnership instead of servitude. I want consultation instead of assumption. I want to be included in decisions that affect both of us. Tom nodded thoughtfully. Like what? Like where we spend our vacation. Like how we spend our weekends. Like what we do with our retirement savings. You want to make those decisions together. I want to make them together, yes. Even the retirement money? I looked at him carefully. Tom, is there something about our finances I should know? He was quiet for a long moment, then sighed heavily. We are not in as good shape as I've been telling you. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I mean, the market hasn't been kind to us, and I made some investments that didn't work out. We're not in trouble, but we're not as secure as we should be at our age. How long have you known this? 2 years. 2 years? And you didn't tell me? I didn't want you to worry. I thought I could fix it. I set down my fork and looked at my husband. Really looked at him and saw something I hadn't noticed before. He looked tired, older, worried. Tom, we're supposed to be partners. That means sharing the worries, not just the good news. I know. I was embarrassed. About money? About failing to provide for you the way I promised I would. The admission hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure how to cross. Tom, you haven't failed. We're figuring this out together now. Are we? If you want to, yes. Tom reached across the table and took my hand. I do want to. I'm just not sure I know how anymore. Neither do I, but we can learn. We spent the next hour talking about money, really talking about it for the first time in our marriage. Tom showed me statements, explained the investments, walked me through our current situation. It wasn't as bad as I'd feared, but it wasn't as secure as I'd believed. What about your business? Tom asked. How much are you making? For the first time, I told him the actual numbers. His eyebrows went up. Margaret, that's really good. It's growing every month. Could it eventually replace some of my income? If I wanted to retire early or work part-time? The question surprised me. You're thinking about retiring. I'm thinking about having options. I'm 63, Margaret. I've been working for 40 years. Maybe it's time to think about what comes next. What would you want to do? Tom smiled, and for a moment I saw the young man I'd married. I'd like to travel, see places we've never been. Maybe volunteer somewhere. Build things with my hands, instead of sitting in meetings all day. Those sound like wonderful dreams. They're not just dreams anymore, are they? If your business keeps growing, if we're smart about our money, maybe they could be real. I squeezed his hand. Maybe they could. Later that night, as we got ready for bed, Tom asked another question. Margaret, are you happy? I thought about it. Really thought about it. I'm happier than I've been in years. Even with all the changes, all the difficult conversations, especially because of them. Tom nodded. I think I understand that now. Do you? Change is scary, but being invisible is worse. I looked at my husband with surprise and gratitude. Yes, I said. That's exactly right. As I lay in bed that night, I thought about the conversation with Sarah, Mike's phone call, dinner with Tom. For the first time in decades, I felt like I was part of a family instead of just serving one. It wasn't perfect. There would be setbacks, misunderstandings, moments when we'd all slip back into old patterns. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer invisible, and they were no longer taking me for granted. Tomorrow I would go to Eleanor's house and continue building the business that had given me back my sense of worth. Tomorrow evening I would come home to a family that was learning to see me as a person instead of a service. It had taken 61, Years, but I was finally living my own life, and it felt like the perfect place to begin.